Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Ranjiku falls in love with Naruto, part 2, subscribe if you enjoy the video, let's start the story. She claimed that I had to let her send me to the Soul Society, or otherwise I would turn into a horrible monster if I had remained in the land of the living. But when I'd let her do the Konso thing, I ended up in some place called Rukongai District 64, instead of the Soul Society. I can't believe I listened to that liar. Ranjiku looked on, confused. But, Naruto-kun, you are in Soul Society. What? I said that you are in Soul Society. Rukongai is a part of the Soul Society, it's where a majority of the souls live. But if this is where you go after you die, then why does this district look so beaten up? Do all souls end up here when they pass on? Asked Naruto. Ranjiku shook her head. Not all of them, Naruto-kun. Usually it's just a matter of chance. You see, Rukonagi is divided into 320 districts, with 80 districts for each cardinal direction. North, east, south, and west. As the number of the districts increase, the standard of living decreases. District 1's, like Junranin of West Rukongai, is considered to be the most luxurious place to live, where the streets are clean, the food is exquisite, and there is never any crime. District 80's like North Araki, on the other hand, is known to be the worst place to live imaginable. It's used as a hideout for criminals, and the living conditions are almost non-existent. But the most important part of Soul Society is surrounded by all 320 districts, Sirate. It is at Sirate where the Shinigami reside. So what you're saying is that since we're currently in District 64, we're basically living in something similar to a civilized ghetto? Asked Naruto disbelievingly. Well, I wouldn't exactly call it a ghetto. But yes, this district is one of the poorer ones. Naruto became silent, his face taking on a deadpan expression. Ranjiku was caught off guard by the sudden change in emotions, it just didn't seem right for someone so bright and cheerful to be so cold and distant looking. She thought that Naruto must have been really upset about something and was just about to ask what was wrong when Naruto broke the silence. That damned monkey brat. Now that threw her for a loop. Monkey brat? She asked. Naruto just looked at her, blushing out of embarrassment for speaking his personal thoughts. Oh, sorry about that. It's just a nickname for the Shinigami that brought me here. I remember that her last name was Sirigaki, it literally means monkey brat. I'd be surprised if no one has ever called her that before. Said Naruto mirthfully, as he laughed along with Ranjiku. But Hiyori Sirigaki, the lieutenant of the 12th division, was just cleaning her sword off after she had just killed yet another hollow that plagued the sector she was supposed to be patrolling. She was in a bad mood when she was sent out after sending that annoying blonde ninja to the Soul Society and had used the hollows that were there as a way to vent out her frustrations. She was just about to phone for a portal back to Sirate when she felt an odd sensation at the back of her head. It was similar to the one she got whenever her captain was making fun of her height, yet there was a slight variation to it. It was as if someone else was making fun of her for an entirely different yet equally humiliating reason. And she had felt it plaguing her for a while now. So, another smart ass thinks he can get away with making fun of me, eh? She said to herself, her eyebrow twitching all the while. I swear, when I find that smug bastard, I'm gonna beat him into a bloody pulp in the most painful ways imaginable. Back at North District 64. Anyways, I was meaning to ask you before, but why exactly were you out on your own? Asked Naruto. This time it was Ranjiku's turn to look downtrodden. I'm not exactly sure myself. Aside from my name, the fact that I've been living on my own and that I have no place to call home, I can't remember anything. She said, sadly. Naruto immediately felt stupid for not being more tactful on what was appropriate to say around girls, specifically one that looked as if she went through a rough time. It's so frustrating, she said suddenly, as she threw her hands to the ground, her gaze focused on where her hands were. I've been trying all this time to try and regain my memories, and yet nothing's come back to me. I've been wandering around without a clue as to where I was going, hoping that I would be able to find something or someone to help me remember. But all that did was nearly kill me. Everyone that I approached for help just dismissed me or treated me as if I were a parasite. I don't care if I was the daughter of a rich family, if I was abandoned at birth, or if I had any friends, all I want is to remember just who I am. She wailed, as her frame began to shudder, tears slowly dripping to the ground. Do you have any idea on what it's like to go on living not knowing if there's anyone out there that actually cares? To have people blatantly ignore you when you need help. To know that everyone around you doesn't care if you live or die. At this point, she didn't bother to hold back the silent tears. She was just too tired of keeping everything bottled up. Besides, it wasn't like Naruto was going to stay now that he had fulfilled his promise to her. Everyone wanted little to do with her, and she was sure that he would be no exception. After all, who would want to be around an amnesiac nobody like her? So she was very surprised when she felt his arms wrap around herself and pull her into a large embrace. Her face shot up to meet Naruto's to ask him why he was wasting her time with her, only to be shocked to see a few tears sliding down his cheeks. "I know all too well what you've been through, Ranjiku-chan," said Naruto, remorsefully. "Feeling like there's no point to your life, seeing strangers glare and sneer at you whenever you walk by. I've experienced the same thing from when I was born to the day I died. I've had people who I thought were my friends belittle me every day just because everyone else was doing it. I grew up experiencing hatred and hostility from everyone in my old village just for existing. And I know that the worst part about being alone is not having someone to depend on, someone to comfort you when you're feeling depressed." Ranjiku's eyes widened at how thoroughly the boy hugging her described what she went through with such detail. She gazed deeply into his eyes, trying to search for any signs of deceit in them. But all she saw was sincerity and sympathy within those pools of deep ocean blue. They were the eyes of someone who had been forced to endure one hardship after another throughout their entire life, someone who experienced firsthand just how cruel people can be to each other. "But the thing is, you don't have to be alone. Not anymore, Ranjiku-chan," he said, his eyes quickly brightening to their usual sunny disposition as he wiped away the tears. "Despite everything that had happened to me, I still found people that accepted me. They were my light that kept me from being consumed by the darkness that was always around me. They were there for me whenever I needed help, just like how I want to be there for you." Ranjiku gasped in surprise, hardly believing what she had heard. Naruto continued on, regardless, as he eased up on his grip so that he could face her. "I've practically lived through hell when I was alive, and I'll be damned if I allow another person go through the same torture that I have. I know that you've just met me and that you're still missing your memories, but I'd really like to be friends with you, Ranjiku-chan." He finished with a toothy smile that gave the appearance of a grinning fox. "You really want to be my friend?" she asked, doing a spot-on imitation of the shy Hyuga heiress that he knew from the past. "Well, I know that I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed and that I still have no understanding of how the Soul Society works. But if you'd be willing to put up with me, Before he could finish, Ranjiku slammed into him, throwing her arms around him in one of the fiercest hugs that Naruto had ever received. But what made it even more important to him was how he felt her trembling against him and the small wet spots growing on the front of his kimono. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she said, softly. Naruto just smiled serenely as he hugged her back, aimlessly stroking her hair in an attempt to comfort her. "And you'll never be from now on, Ranjiku-chan," he said. "I'll always be there for you, I promise." "Thank you," sniffled the girl in his arms, who made no effort to break the contact. Naruto just sat there, allowing Ranjiku to release all of the pain and misery she experienced onto him. As he held her, he could help but think about all that had happened since he passed on. Sure, things didn't start off well for him in the beginning. But in the end, it didn't seem as bad as he once thought it would be. So what if he didn't end up in the most luxurious part of Rukongai? He now had a friend that was so similar to him that it was almost scary. And unlike in Konoha, Ranjiku seemed to truly care about his well-being. That unfortunately brought his mind back to Konoha and how the village would be dealing with his death. He knew that the majority of the population still thought ill of him due to the Kyuubi, and that only a few people would actually be sad about his death. "Ah well, there's nothing that I can do about it now. I mean, sure, the people that actually cared about me will be sad, but they have their own friends and family to help them. Plus, now that the fox and I are dead, the Akatsuki will have no reason to target Konoha anymore. Besides, it's not like my death is going to affect the village as a whole. Everyone hates me, they'll be glad to be rid of me. In fact, I bet that they're celebrating my death right now." On Hagakure, the gray sky and steady downpour of rain matched the village's overall mood perfectly. It had been merely a day after the failed Uchiha retrieval mission, as the village's shinobi forces were dressed in black and gathered at the latest addition to the graveyard that was reserved exclusively for those who have died in the line of duty. It was here that they would pay their respects to one Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Yes, Naruto's full heritage was finally revealed, and now everyone in the whole village knew. It had all started when Tsunade held an emergency council meeting in which she declared that Sasuke Uchiha had willingly defected from the village and that he was to be marked as a missing nin. While the civilian council was in an uproar, the Shinobi Council gave their full support to the Hokage's decree, which instantly quelled any attempt to get the Hokage to reconsider her decision for the civilians. It was when she mentioned that Naruto was killed by Sasuke that things went downhill. The civilian council's attitude did a complete reversal, saying how the Uchiha had done them a favor before he left. The shinobi side were just nonplussed about the revelation, but she could have sworn that she saw the Inuzuka and Hyuga clan head smirking. But then, one arrogant counselor had the gall to say how killing Naruto would have been enough to pardon Sasuke of his crimes. That was the last time anyone heard him speak, as the very moment that comment left his mouth, his head was forcefully separated from his body, courtesy of one of Tsunade's chakra-enhanced punches. While it may have not been the best response she could have made, as Hokage, she did manage to get everyone's undivided attention. It was an opportunity, however, in which she fully took advantage of. She wasted no time in berating the civilian council for their callous and prejudiced behavior towards Naruto, treating him with disdain and hostility for something that wasn't his fault. She then redirected her anger at the gathered shinobi clan heads, tearing into them at how they acted no better than the civilians, and had even gone as far as allowing their clansmen secretly orchestrate assaults on the boy. Her glare lingered on Tsume and Hiashi for a brief moment at that point. When another bold citizen demanded why she was making a big deal about Naruto's death, Tsunade shocked everyone present by revealing who Naruto's parents were. That had gotten the desired results, as the whole room became dead silent. Unsurprisingly, it was the same civilian that broke the silence, vehemently denying her claim to be true. It gave Tsunade a bit of grim satisfaction at seeing the council's reactions when she produced the necessary documents to prove her claims valid. Now, everyone was mourning over Naruto's death, including the very people that had made it their duty to make the boy's existence miserable. Fucking hypocrites, the whole lot of them, thought Tsunade with a scowl. The minute Naruto's parents are made known, these bastards act as if the Yandere has died again. Yet not too long ago, they were planning a celebration over his death. But her gaze softened somewhat when she spotted some of the few people that didn't treat Naruto with scorn. The surviving members of the retrieval squad was at the frontmost of the gathered group, each of them solemn-faced and silent in paying their respects to their fallen comrade. Behind them stood the rest of the Konoha 12 and their instructors. Hinata was heavily leaning on Kurenai for support as she tried her best not to break down in despair. Sakura wasn't faring well either, even with Ino by her side. Niji, she observed, still was displaying the generic emotionless Hyuga expression, but she could see from his stance that it was just to hide his grief. She also spotted Iruka Yamino behind the group, standing by Konohamaru and his little friends. To her surprise, Kakashi was actually on time for his student's funeral. She had half expected him to arrive 3 hours late like he usually did. But what was even more unexpected was the fact that Suna's siblings were present as well. When she asked why they had wanted to stay for the funeral, Gaara was the one to answer for the trio. "I want to pay my respect to the one shinobi who saved me from my own self-destruction." That had thrown Tsunade for a loop and made her realize just how influential Naruto could be when he wasn't so hyperactive. To be able to change people like Gaara and herself was something true leaders would have given their arm to have. She mused that he would indeed have made an excellent Hokage before grim reality brought her back into the present. She wasn't looking forward to telling Jiraiya of his godson's fate, as she knew that he had wanted to take Naruto on a 3-year training trip in preparation for the Akatsuki. She didn't even want to think of what he would do once he learned what had happened. With a sigh, she gazed up to the rain cloud-filled sky, watching aimlessly as the rain continued to fall. How fitting. It's as if heaven itself is crying for you, Naruto. She thought sadly, before she walked towards the head of the casket to begin the funeral services for Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Minato Namikaze, Konoha's Yellow Flash, and Yondaime Hokage, and Kushina Uzumaki, the red hot-blooded habanero, and second of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. It was truly a sad day in Konoha, as it would be the day that the village lost the last descendant of the Uzumaki clan and one of its greatest heroes. North Alley of Wandering Spirits. It had been nearly 1.5 years since Naruto had met Ranjiku. During that time, the two had become the best of friends and learned to depend on each other. With Ranjiku's knowledge of Soul Society and Naruto's experience from when he was a shinobi, they were never too bad off. They found little jobs that would pay them just enough to buy food for a day, but they never kept the same job for more than a couple of weeks, lest they draw unnecessary attention to themselves. Yet despite their teamwork, they did have a few days in which they nearly had to go a day without eating. At those times, the whiskered blonde solved their plight with one of his raids, but this time he only stole enough for a day or two. There was no sense in stealing a week's worth of food and then have to lay low for nearly a month. Ranjiku, however, wasn't too keen on Naruto's last resort of stealing food for them and had always made her opinion on the matter verbally known to him. In fact, it was the only time that Naruto had ever seen the girl angry. Yet despite his friend's attitude to his alternative plan for obtaining food, Naruto was more than willing to take the risk as opposed to seeing Ranjiku starve again. It was an argument the two friends had countless, but after one particularly lengthy one that progressed to raised voices and unshed tears, the duo had reached a compromise. Naruto would only go out on one of his raids if it was an utmost emergency, and only if Ranjiku gave her permission to do so beforehand. Despite that one incident, the duo had fallen into a type of routine that they followed diligently. Every morning, after a quick breakfast, they would each go to their respective job and work for the majority of the day. After they got off, which would be around late noon to early evening, they would meet up at the park where they first became friends. They would then have a small dinner before turning in for the night. The two blondes were often exhausted by the end of day's work, but they always made sure to spend some quality time with each other, whether they were taking walks together or just talking about what happened that day. It wasn't the luxurious lifestyle that the citizens of the upper levels of Seoul society experienced, but they were content with being in each other's company. And despite the seemingly endless monotony that made up their life, they were happy to be together. But little did they know that their lives would soon be changed forever. "What do you mean you're firing me?" hollered Naruto, as he desperately tried to refrain from strangling the fat slob of a man in front of him that was once his employer. "It's simple, kid," he answered in a wheezy tone. "The head manager is coming to inspect the premises in 2 days, and I don't want him to see any homeless kids working for me. You understand, right? It's just business." "Business, my ass. You've had me working for your restaurant for over 3 weeks now, with ridiculously long hours and extremely low pay. Hell, your part-time workers make more money than I do, and they only work 2 to 3 days a week," countered Naruto, his temper waning with each passing second. "Yes, well, what did you expect, They aren't homeless street rats looking for handouts and going through garbage cans for food. They can actually provide legit credentials when they apply for work. You're lucky that I even considered allowing you to work for me at all. Legit credentials? Who needs legit credentials to work as a dishwasher or busboy? You know the rules. Unless you can provide a real address and proper identification, you're not fit to work. Now get out of here, I've got potential employees to interview." And with that, the slob began to waddle back to his office. "Aren't you forgetting something?" asked Naruto, stopping the manager in his place. The man just turned to stare at the boy as if he were some annoying pest. What do you want now?" "My payment," Naruto responded, holding out his hand to further his point. "I've worked at this joint for 3 days since my last payday. So I would like you to pay me for the days that I worked whilst I was still under your employment. TCH, not in your life, kid. Or did you forget our little agreement when I hired you on? Because if I recall, you agreed to work for me on the grounds that you would be working longer hours, a smaller paycheck, and that you would only be paid for every work week you've completed." The obese man chuckled cruelly. "Tough break, kid, but them's the rules." "What? I never agree. You never said anything about that stipulation." "Didn't need to, it was specifically mentioned in our little contract." The manager pulled out said document from an inner pocket in his greasy haori, his finger specifically pointing at a certain line of text. Naruto leaned in closely to search for the ridiculous clause, only for his eyes to widen once he found it hidden within the text. "You've got that damn thing practically buried. No one could have possibly found it in their first reading." "Hey, it's not my fault you don't read contracts carefully," the fat man said smugly, stuffing the contract back into his haori. "This is completely unfair. You can't do this." "Well, guess what, brat? I just did. And there's not a thing that you can do about it. Sure, you can call the local authorities, but who do you think they're going to believe, eh? A respectful shift manager of a restaurant or a no-name street rat that's been known to steal food from the vendors in this neighborhood?" Naruto flinched, knowing that the disgusting slob had him where he wanted. In one of his more amateurish mistakes, the blonde had been caught by the man eating some of his spoils, just moments after the patrol Shinigami had asked him to keep a lookout for anyone suspicious that had products from a high-quality fruit vendor. At first, Naruto thought that his boss simply didn't care what he did so long as he worked for him, but now it was obvious that he was just waiting for the right moment to use it against him. Knowing that he had no way to counteract his former boss's blackmail, Naruto silently made his way out the restaurant, not willing to give the overweight bastard of a boss the satisfaction of hearing him admit defeat. Naruto stormed out of the back kitchen, through the main dining area, and out the front door, his mind a whirlwind of anxiety and dread. Although the whiskered blonde absolutely hated working for that jerk, it was still a means to make money for food, clothes, and other necessities for him and Ranjiku. Additionally, now was not a good time for him to be jobless. About 2 weeks ago, the store where Ranjiku was working had gone out of business and she was having a rough time in finding another job. And with their income practically cut in half, it made buying food a lot more difficult. Sure, Naruto was able to sneak a few meals from his job without his bastard boss catching on, and the cooks were nice enough to give him the leftover food when they closed up for the night, but it just wasn't enough. But now that he was unemployed once again, he didn't know what to do next. "Naruto-kun." The sudden outburst broke Naruto out of his inner musings, and he found himself standing a few feet away from the clearing he and Ranjiku had set up as their temporary home. It was somewhat discomforting that he had made it back home without him even realizing it. "Hey there, Ranjiku-chan," he answered with a tired smile as she approached him. The girl that stood before him looked nothing like the one he had found when he had first arrived in Seoul society. Now that they were able to buy food on an almost daily basis, she no longer looked like she was going to starve to death on the streets. She was dressed in a much cleaner black kimono than her last one and had grown her hair down to her shoulders. But the most noticeable change that she had made to her appearance was the bright pink silk scarf that was tied around her neck. He had seen her admiring it from one of the stalls that they had passed whenever they went to work. Even though it had cost Naruto a surprisingly high amount of money due to the fact that the scarf was made out of high-quality silk, he felt it was well worth it. The look on her face when he'd given it to her as a gift on her birthday, which coincidentally was the same day that they had met, was priceless. That memory never failed to make him smile. Flashback starts. "Hey, Ranjiku-chan," greeted Naruto, a massive grin stretched across his face as he saw his friend make her way towards their home. He had a small package wrapped in old newspapers hidden behind his back, ready to surprise her. But his happy mood took a nosedive when he saw how depressed she looked. "Hey, what's wrong?" "I got fired from my job at the clothes store, Naruto-kun," she said, despondently. "What?" exclaimed Naruto. "Why? I thought the manager liked you." "She did, until she caught me trying to steal from her. But I didn't do it, I swear," she hurriedly explained. "Of course you didn't, I know that you would never do such a thing. But why would the manager?" "It was Meiho Kazami," scowled Ranjiku. "She snuck several of the more expensive products into my locker whilst I was on my break. When the manager noticed the products missing, Meiho led her straight to me. But you were innocent. Didn't your boss at least give you a chance to explain your side of the story?" "Of course she didn't. If she had to choose between firing a legal employee like Meiho or some homeless bum like me, it'd be obvious that she'd go with the one that wasn't supposed to be working there in the first place." She sighed. "So it looks like our funds are going to be strained for a while. Well, at least until I can find another job." "I'm so sorry, Ranjiku-chan. I know how much you liked working there." He scowled as he recalled the time he had met the woman that he had assumed to be fair and unbiased. "I can't believe that fat bitch just fired you just from the lies of that spoiled bitch Meiho. I am going to make her pay for this, make no mistake." "No, Naruto-kun, don't even think about that." The strawberry blonde sighed tiredly. "Look, can we please not talk about this now? I've had a very long day." "Oh, yeah, sure, of course," answered Naruto, internally kicking himself for dwelling on Ranjiku's bad experience. "And I have just the thing to help distract you." With an elaborate flourish, Naruto whipped a wrapped package from behind his back and presented it to his friend. "Happy birthday, Ranjiku-chan." Ranjiku's eyes widened in surprise. "And my birthday?" Naruto nodded. "Do you know what today is?" "Of course I do, it's September 29th, we met each other 1 year ago today. And on that day, we both agreed that September 29th was also going to be." Realization flashed through her eyes. "My birthday." The strawberry blonde lightly conked the side of her head with her fist, sticking out her tongue playfully. "I'm such an airhead. I've been so busy that I completely forgot my own birthday." But her good mood soon vanished as she recalled what exactly had happened earlier that day. That is, until Naruto gave her a light flick to her nose, making her pout cutely. "Hey now, none of that," said Naruto with a big smile stretched across his face. "This is your special day and I won't have you spend it worrying about work. We'll deal with that mess tomorrow, okay?" Ranjiku wanted to protest, but the whiskered blonde's happy mood was just too infectious to resist. With a smile she accepted Naruto's gift, which she noticed was wrapped in old newspapers. "Sorry about the messy appearance, but I couldn't find any good cheap wrapping paper within my budget," said Naruto sheepishly. "But you'll really like what's waiting underneath the wrapping, I assure you." Ranjiku just giggled at her friend's enthusiasm as she tore into the newspaper with gusto, revealing a small bundle wrapped in thin white tissue paper that was extremely light in her hands. Her curiosity piqued even more, she carefully removed the secondary layer of paper and gasped at what she saw. There in her hands was a long, silken scarf, just like the ones that she had seen from that one stall that she passed by every day on her way to and from work. Word on the street was that they were tailored out of the softest of silk by a woman who was a retired seamstress. She had always wanted one, but they were just too expensive since most of their money went into buying food and other necessities. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, the very day that they could spare enough money to buy one was the day that the stall had sold the very last scarf. To make matters worse, the vendor said that the woman had stopped making them due to health issues. That was a sad day for the girl, as she thought that she'd lost her chance to buy something really nice, and yet, there was one lying in her hands. And it was pink, her favorite color. This is when she stuttered disbelievingly before her eyes darted to Naruto. "Where did you get this?" Naruto's expression turned sheepish as he began to idly scratch at his cheek. "Well, I noticed how often you'd stop by to look at those things, so I started saving up a little secret fund. I was actually lucky to raise enough money to buy the last one when I got off work early. The real challenge was keeping it hidden until your birthday," explained Naruto. But the only scarf they had left was colored pink. so I'm sorry if it's the wrong color, but whatever Naruto was going to say was abruptly cut off as he felt the air knocked out of him when Ranjiku collided against his body and wrapped her arms around him in a massive hug. Naruto was momentarily stunned, considering that he didn't have much intimate contact with people when he was alive, but still managed to return the hug in a somewhat awkward manner. "I love it," exclaimed Ranjiku, happily. "I absolutely love it." "Oh really?" asked Naruto, unsure of what he was hearing. Ranjiku gave him one last squeeze before she stepped back, a beaming smile on her face. "Of course I do. This is the best birthday present I've ever gotten." Technically it was the only birthday present that she recalled ever receiving, but that was beside the point. Relinquishing her hold on her friend, Ranjiku took a step back and wrapped the silk garment around her neck, securing it with a simple knot. Now wearing her latest accessory, she struck a pose, holding a peace sign and sending a playful wink towards Naruto. "Well, how do I look?" As Naruto took in her appearance, he began to realize that he was having a hard time keeping his impending blush under control. He couldn't understand why, but things had started changing between Ranjiku and him. It started with just the simple things, from how she would always hug him after he came home from work, to how she always seemed to make him laugh whenever he was feeling down. But then, it began to progress further. The way her eyes always seemed to shine in the moonlight, how her laughter would send excited shivers down his spine, or how she seemed to always end up cuddling up against him when they slept. He was beginning to experience feelings that he had never experienced before, not even when he'd been pursuing Sakura's affections when he was still amongst the living. That thought alone had kept the Uzumaki up for several nights, with countless unanswered questions constantly bombarding his mind. "Hello, Naruto-kun. Are you still with me?" The whiskered blonde snapped out of his thoughts to see that Ranjiku was still in pose. "Don't leave me hanging like this. Aren't you going to answer my question?" "Sorry, Ranjiku-chan. You look really cute in that scarf." Naruto managed to utter through his flustered stuttering. Ranjiku's eyes widened in surprise, while cheeks darkened with a small blush. "Do you really mean that?" "Of course I do." He cursed himself for sounding so nervous. She was his friend, he shouldn't have any trouble talking to her. "It's just that I wish that I could have gotten you something more than just a scarf." He was about to say how he wanted to buy her something else when he felt a pair of warm, moist lips being pressed against his cheek. Turning to his left, he saw that Ranjiku was blushing up a storm, but she managed a small smile. "Well, I think it's perfect," she said quietly, before engulfing the other blonde in another hug. "Thank you for the lovely present, Naruto-kun." Flashback ends. Naruto-kun. The whiskered blonde was jostled out of his reminiscing by Ranjiku's voice, bringing him back to reality. He noted that his friend was looking at him with concerned eyes. "Sorry about that, Ranjiku-chan, I've had a very bad day." "What was it that you were saying?" he asked. Ranjiku huffed in annoyance at her friend's habit of spacing out at the most awkward of times. "I said, what are you doing home early? Don't you usually get off from work later than this?" Instantly, Naruto's mood soured as his mind recalled the fiasco he had just experienced. Seeing his downtrodden expression, Ranjiku immediately knew that something was up. "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" Naruto sighed. "I was just let go from the restaurant." "What? But why? Your supervisor has been making you work 6 days a week with reduced pay for almost a month. Why would he just fire you on the spot like that?" "Well, apparently, the general manager is coming by this week and the fat bastard thought that a street rat like me working there would make for a bad report. So, he sacked me, but he made sure to do so after I was nearly finished for the day." "But he paid you for the days that you worked, right?" laughed Naruto, sarcasm heavily lacing his voice. "Have you actually seen the guy I used to work for, Ranjiku-chan? He weighs more than the both of us combined and is always dressed in expensive clothes. That alone shows that he cares more about fattening his own wallet and himself than paying his employees a decent wage. Plus, he managed to trick me into signing a contract where I only got paid for every work week I complete. And guess who just missed next week's paycheck by 4 days?" He finished by jabbing his thumb to himself. "That's completely unfair," shouted Ranjiku. "How could he do something so arg? If he was right here, I'd punt him. Isn't there anything that you can do?" That question earned a grimace from Naruto. "Not if we want the local authorities to catch wind of us." At her questioning glance, he continued. "The guy managed to catch me in an awkward position when I grabbed a few things from that old high-quality produce store, but didn't do anything or turn me in. Since he didn't fire me on the spot that day, I thought that he just forgot about it. But I guess that's just wishful thinking on my part, he was just saving his little discovery until he needed it." "That fat bastard," growled Ranjiku angrily, before she engulfed the other blonde in a hug. "I'm sorry that you were fired from your job, Naruto-kun." "Thanks, Ranjiku-chan, but I'm the one who should be sorry. I mean, me getting fired isn't exactly what we need at this moment," replied Naruto as he returned the hug. He didn't want to ask what was on his mind, but he knew that he couldn't simply put it off until later. Out of curiosity, how much food do we have left? Just enough to last us for about 3 days. And how is the money situation? We probably have enough to buy enough supplies to last us 2 more days. Naruto bit back the curse that he wanted to shout. And what about the job interviews? Got any possible callbacks lined up? Ranjiku just shook her head, not feeling like answering. Naruto sighed once again, already beginning to feel a headache coming on. Everything just seemed to fall apart all at once. Aren't we in a mess? Said Naruto to himself before his gaze turned back down to the girls still hugging him. So, now do you regret not taking up that Jin guy's offer to go to Sirte? He yelped as he felt Ranjiku pinch his arm sharply. The irritated look she gave him showed that she wasn't amused. That's not funny, Naruto-kun. I thought we agreed to not talk about that anymore. She chided. I know, but I was just saying that. Look, I understand what you're talking about, but I meant what I said 5 months ago. You remember that promise that we made, right? Flashback start. Naruto was in a good mood for once. He had managed to finish his work at his current job as a stock boy for a grocery store, allowing him to punch out at 3 p.m., and he managed to find a sale on apples, bread, and ground beef. He was on his way to surprise Ranjiku, as she usually got off work around this time. As he turned the corner, he was surprised to see his friend talking to a boy that looked like he was around their age. He had pale, white hair, and his clothes were in a somewhat better condition than both his and Ranjiku's, although he could still see some minute stains and tears. But it was the boy's face that really got his attention. That big smile combined with those closed eyes just rubbed him the wrong way. His expression reminded him of a weasel, fox, snake all at the same time. From what he could see, the two were in the middle of an interesting conversation, which bothered him for some unknown reason and prompted him to make himself known. Ranjiku-chan. His shout managed to catch his friend's attention, her eyes brightening when she saw her best friend approaching her. Naruto-kun. What are you doing here? She exclaimed as she ran towards him and engulfed him in a hug. I managed to get all of my work done early, so I decided to surprise you. And I managed to find a few good sales at the grocery store, so we're going to be set for the next few days. Ranjiku cheered in delight, whilst the strange boy looked somewhat perplexedly at him. You need to eat as well? Asked the boy. Naruto just stared at him, as if he grew a second head. Well, yeah, because not eating is just too painful and uncomfortable. Oh, what's your name? Oh. I'm sorry, I completely forgot. Interjected Ranjiku before she gestured to the boy standing beside her. Naruto-kun, this is Jin Ichimaru. Jin-san, this is my best friend, Naruto Uzumaki. It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto-san. Said Jin as he gave a small polite bow. Likewise. Replied Naruto, giving a bow of his own. But back to your question. Why did it surprise you to find out that Ranjiku-chan and I need to eat? Because an ordinary soul doesn't really require much food to survive. Only those with large amounts must have constant nourishment. Reiwa, Ryoku or spiritual energy, as it's commonly known. It's the energy that resides inside every soul within the Soul Society. The amount varies from soul to soul, with the Shinigami being the ones that normally have the largest reserves. It is through this that they are able to enhance their fighting capabilities, enabling them to safeguard the souls in both our world and the living world. That caught Naruto's attention. Ever since that Shirogaki girl had helped him pass on, he became curious as to what made the Shinigami tick. And if they relied on this to fight, then he reckoned that they were somewhat similar to the shinobi from his old homeworld. But there was still something that he didn't fully understand. How do you know all of this, Jin-san? Asked Naruto, warily. Jin's smile widened, which put Naruto on guard for some reason. Well, it's simple, really. I possess it too. Granted, I don't have as much as you do, Naruto-san, but I'd say I'm just about at Ranjiku-chan's level. As Ranjiku gushed over Jin's knowledge of spiritual energy, Naruto couldn't help but scowl at how familiar the strange boy seemed to act with his friend. That bothersome feeling was back again, only this time it was a bit stronger. So, do you live around here, Jin-san? He asked, in an attempt to keep the Silverette's attention away from Ranjiku. Well, no, I don't. I somehow got lost on my way to District 32 and I happened across Ranjiku-chan here. She was kind enough to point me back to the right path. Oh, I'm glad that she was able to help then. There are quite a few characters that you wouldn't want to run across in District 64, if you know what I mean. I guess that you probably want to get on your way if you want to reach District 32 before nightfall. Actually, there was something that I wanted to tell Ranjiku-chan just before you found us. And now that I think about it, this will most likely affect you, as well. Naruto and Ranjiku shared a brief worried glance before turning their attention back to Ichimaru. What are you talking about, Jin-san? Lately, there has been talk about an increase in crime and violence around the lower districts. Robbery, fights between gangs, murder, they're all occurring more frequently at an alarming rate. And on top of that, jobs are becoming more and more scarce for those that are without proper homes. With each passing word that left Jin's mouth, the more Naruto's heart sank. It was becoming increasingly difficult to hold on to jobs in their district, even more so whenever they had to find new ones. And having to maintain constant vigilance over himself and Ranjiku for the less favorable characters that prowled the streets at night for any woman or child they could corner didn't exactly help him in the long run. Where exactly is this happening? Which districts are displaying the surge in violence and crime? The whiskered blonde asked. So far, from what I've personally heard, it's mainly happening in District 70 through 80. But with the way things are, I wouldn't be surprised if your district becomes affected as well. And is that why you're trying to get into District 32? Yes, actually, I am. Then you must have some pretty well-connected friends. I know that the gateways to District 40 and upwards are heavily guarded and that the only way that someone from the lower districts can ever hope to be allowed passage is by travel papers. But those are extremely hard to come by, especially if you're from the slums. But not if you know people who can make forgeries of said papers that look convincing enough to fool the guards. Retorted. Naruto looked at the squinty-eyed, smiling stranger in shock. Trying to gain passage to the upper districts with counterfeit travel papers was an extremely dangerous risk and was punished quite severely whenever someone was caught in the act. Those papers must have cost an arm and a leg to get. The Ichimaru boy actually chuckled. I have to admit, the price was quite steep, but I'd say that it was worth a sacrifice for a chance at a better life. My partner and I were going to attempt our little trip 2 days ago, but when I arrived at our meeting place, she never came. It was only yesterday that I learned that she was killed in a massive gang fight. Ranjiku gasped in horror, her hands unconsciously shooting up to cover her mouth, whilst Naruto remained respectfully silent. They had seen their fair share of gang fights and were fortunate enough to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. But those that weren't as fortunate as them were never the same afterward, that is if they were lucky enough to survive. I'm so sorry for your loss, said Naruto, having no idea on what to say beyond a simple apology. Thank you. I was, at first, tempted to just forget about the pilgrimage to District 32, but I eventually decided that doing so would be an insult to her memory. I had a few close calls, but one in particular had forced me to take more drastic measures to ensure my escape, which caused me to lose my way. That's when I happened across your friend and she was willing to help me out. We talked a bit about our lives until you found us, Naruto-san. Jin then turned back to Ranjiku. But I wanted to ask you something very important, Ranjiku-chan. Even though my friend had passed away, I still kept her passage papers. And I was wondering, would you like to come with me to District 32? Come with you, Ranjiku exclaimed, caught off guard by Jin's offer. But, why? I want to give you the chance for a better life. With things getting progressively worse in the lower districts, I thought that it would best if you left while you still had the chance. Granted, I didn't know that you were living with someone, and I apologize for springing this proposition so suddenly in front of you and your friend. But what about Naruto-kun? Isn't there any way that we can find someone that can forge passage papers for him, as well? I wish that there was some way to help him, but the man who wrote up these papers had left right after he made papers for my friend and me. And there isn't enough time to search for anyone else to create false papers for your friend, it would cost too much, and our window of opportunity to escape has a time limit. If we want to escape to the upper districts, we would need to leave today. Throughout the conversation, Naruto's mind was a torrent of conflicting emotions. He didn't know how to feel towards the situation that had been practically thrust into his face. He felt elated that there was a chance that Ranjiku could escape the slums for a better life, jealousy that it was this Jin stranger that was providing her a means of escape, anger that Ranjiku's acceptance of the proposal would mean that his friend would stop traveling with him, as well the fact that he was getting angry with himself for being angry in the first place. It was all very confusing to the young boy and he didn't know how to make sense of it all. And it only made things worse when he noticed that Ranjiku's hesitant gaze was focused on him. He could see the uncertainty and nervousness in her eyes. The fact that she wanted his opinion on what to decide made him feel touched that she valued his input and slightly put off that she could potentially ruin her only chance of happiness if he told her not to go. And that thought alone made Naruto sick to his stomach. If he prevented his friend from finding happiness, even if it was unintentional, he would never be able to live with himself. It's all up to you, Ranjiku-chan. Whatever you decide to do, I'll always support you. He said with a smile, despite the feeling that he was thrusting a rusted knife into his heart with each word that left his mouth. The sensation only worsened once he saw Ranjiku's eyes take on a firm resolve, a resolve that filled his being with dread and anxiety. I really appreciate your offer, Jin-san, she began, prompting Naruto to turn away so as not to see Ranjiku leave with a stranger that promised her an escape from District 64, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline. Not believing what he had just heard, Naruto whipped back around to face Ranjiku, who was smiling brightly at him. Jin froze, so surprised by the girl's answer that the whiskered blonde was able to briefly see the Silveret's eyes in all of their red glory. "What? Did you actually think that I would just leave District 64 without you?" She continued, chiding him playfully. "When we first met, you promised me that you would always be there for me, right? Well, guess what? That promise of yours goes both ways, Buster." "But Ranjiku-chan," stammered Naruto, "this could be your only chance to get out of District 64. Are you sure that you really want to give it up?" "Naruto-san has a point," said Jin, deciding to add his own 2 cents. "The living conditions are only going to worsen for this district. It would be best if you escaped as soon as possible." "I know," replied Ranjiku, "but life in the upper districts just wouldn't be the same without my best friend. I really appreciate your gesture, Jin-san, but I'm not going anywhere without Naruto-kun. Either we both leave District 64 together or no one leaves at all." Flashback ends. "Of course I do. I could never forget, even if I wanted to," answered Naruto, relishing the embrace he was sharing with Ranjiku as he recalled one of his favorite moments. He always enjoyed their hugs, he always felt at ease for some inexplicable reason. That was the last time either of them had seen Jin Ichimaru. He'd left once Ranjiku made it perfectly clear that she wasn't going anywhere without Naruto. And while Naruto was extremely touched that Ranjiku treasured their friendship to such a strong degree, there were still times in which he wondered if she would have been better off going with them. Like Jin had predicted, life in District 64 began to drastically worsen. Jobs were becoming harder and harder to find, let alone hold on to, and crime rates had gone up within the district. At first it was just robbery and random fights breaking out. But soon, there were more heinous crimes like abduction, rape, and murder occurring with alarming frequency. There were nights where Naruto went without sleep in order to make sure that no sick pervert tried anything with Ranjiku. Sure, it left him completely exhausted in the morning, but his friend's safety was worth more than a few hours of sleep. And now, with the recent loss of his job, things weren't looking well for the two blondes. "Aw, well isn't that sweet? Two street rats, embracing each other in the slums of District 64. Sneered an arrogant male voice. The blondes whipped their heads in the direction where they heard the voice and were met with a very unwelcome sight. There standing behind them was a trio of police officers, all of whom were leering dangerously at the duo. Although Naruto managed to keep a cool facade, he was panicking like mad in his mind. The leader of the trio had been the lead investigator in his raids. He'd noticed that particular officer investigating the scene every time he stole from a store. "Can we help you, sir?" Naruto asked politely, hoping to somehow avoid any possible physical confrontations. "Yeah, you and your little friend can come with us, quietly, to the station," snarked the officer that was to the left of his commander. The one on the right just nodded, the smirk never leaving his face. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're talking about. Are we being accused of something? Don't try to play innocent with us, brat. We know that you're responsible for a chain of robberies from several stores in the area throughout the past year and a half. And since your little girlfriend didn't report your crimes and instead seemed to have profited from them, I'd say that she's your accomplice." The commanding officer all but snarled. It took all of Naruto's self-control not to panic, the only sign of anxiety being the slight widening of his eyes. "Those are some big accusations you're throwing around," he said. "You three had better have substantial evidence to back them up." The three policemen guffawed cruelly at the boy's words, as if he was a part of some inside joke. "Did you hear that, lads?" said the lead officer in between laughs. "The little bastard is asking for evidence of his crimes." When he had finally gotten his laughter back under control, he shot a particularly nasty look at the young pair. "Well, how's this for undeniable evidence? Your last employer gave us a tip that he caught you with merchandise that had been reported stolen from a store a few weeks ago. And how do you know that he's not lying to you guys? Because he just so happens to be an old friend of mine, you little shit. Then why isn't he in trouble? He was purposely withholding vital information. How come he isn't being incarcerated as well?" Ranjiku couldn't stand being silent any longer, watching as Naruto tried to defend the two of them. "Because, if I have to choose between showing leniency towards two homeless, thieving street rats, or a tax-paying supervisor of a restaurant, then it's quite obvious whose side I'm gonna take. And here's a hint. It's not yours." The commander's underlings erupted in another cruel bout of laughter, which sent chills down both Naruto and Ranjiku's backs. The policemen in District 64 had a nasty penchant of being easily persuaded by outside forces and were known to be violent towards suspected criminals, engaging in acts of brutality which both Naruto and Ranjiku had observed several times already. "And another thing, considering that you have managed to remain undetected for so long, you two are going to be locked up for a fairly long time," continued the officer, his subordinate slowly inching towards them. Naruto's eyes slowly met Ranjiku's for a brief instant before they about-faced and made a run for it. But they didn't get far as two more officers appeared in front of them with their katanas drawn from their sheaths. Backing away from the new enemies, they glanced behind them and saw the first three officers approaching, joining the other two in forming a circle around them. "Oh, I can't tell you how long I've waited to catch you two after all of the humiliation that we've endured. I hope the both of you aren't afraid of the dark because it's going to be your new best friend. But don't worry, you two will get to share your suffering together." Naruto's heart rate skyrocketed, his eyes darting from officer to officer as his mind desperately tried to think of a way to escape. Yet even he knew that their situation was bleak. He and Ranjiku were up against 5 fully trained law enforcers, all of whom knew of their past actions. He was brought out of his panic thoughts when he felt something take hold of his hand. Chancing a glance, he saw Ranjiku's quivering hand grasping his own. She was terrified of what was going to happen next, he could see it in her eyes. Naruto wanted to reassure her, to tell her that they would find a way to get out of their current debacle, but he knew just how futile it was. Staying silent, he gave her hand a hard squeeze as they helplessly watched the officers approach closer. "I'm so sorry, Ranjiku-chan. I tried my best to protect you, but it just wasn't good enough," he thought as the lead enforcer finally stopped a few feet in front of them. Naruto pulled Ranjiku into an embrace in a last-ditch effort to shield her from the brunt of the impending beating and clenched his eyes shut. The tense silence permeated the area as he waited for the first blow to land when suddenly, back at number 1. Sai. Back at number 4. Hinawa. 5 surprised yelps sounded throughout the area, followed swiftly by a flash of light so intense that Naruto could vaguely see it through his eyelids. Puzzled as to what was going on, Naruto slowly cracked one of his eyes open with a smidgen, only for both of them to bolt open as he gasped at the sight before him. Ranjiku, her curiosity getting the better of her, looked to see what her friend was looking at, only to gape at what she saw. All 5 officers were on the ground, struggling in vain to free themselves from a bright yellow glowing rope that was tied around their bodies. And on top of that, their arms, which were crossed behind their backs, looked as if they were being held in place by some unseen force. It was quite the sight to see, one that the duo silently agreed was much better than the previous one. But before they could even try to get away from the whole fiasco, 2 black blurs landed in front of them. They were both tall young men, in their mid to late 20s, their backs facing them. Both of them were wearing black shirikishans, with white obi belts tied around their waists. On their feet were straw sandals with white tabi socks. The only thing that really made the two stand apart was their hair color. The one on the left had ash gray hair, whilst the right one was raven black. "You know, the black-haired one, I could have handled this on my own. This is one of my division's duties, after all." The other man laughed. "That's true, but I thought that you could do it with a little help. Besides, as a member of the 9th Division, it is my sworn duty to be ready in case of emergencies. You know, being in charge of security and everything. Yeah, for all of Gate 13. And on top of that, you oversee the development of new arts and culture and are in charge of that Sirte news magazine. My division, however, handles assassination jobs, policing duties, and maintaining the detention facilities. And let's not forget your glorious courier duties, messenger boy." Boy. That's some tough talk coming from a newspaper reporter. "You want to start something, fire spitter?" exclaimed the gray-haired man as he literally butted heads with his compatriot. "Maybe I will." "What are you going to do about it, tree hugger?" countered the who pushed back against the man's forehead with his own. "You arrogant Shinigami scum, release me this instant." Before the two Shinigami could continue their bickering, the hog-tied leader of the policemen decided to make himself known. Silently agreeing to hold off their little argument until later, they walked to the immobilized law enforcer until he was standing right in front of him, his toes inches away from the man's nose. The policeman gazed up at the Shinigami with a sneer, not even attempting his contempt. "You Shinigami bastards. Who do you think you're doing, trying to muscle in on my jurisdiction? What I'm doing, you despicable corrupt piece of shit," snarling the Shinigami, "is my job. Making sure that scum like you and your cronies are properly punished. And considering your long list of crimes, Kamada, I'd say that every single one of you will be lucky enough to avoid getting the death sentence. You can't do this to us. Where's your proof?" "Proof? Proof? How about the countless instances in which you and your little followers have repeatedly gotten away with extortion, blackmail, accepting bribes, making arrests under false pretenses, rape, and let's not forget about murder. And don't even think about trying to deny your horrendous crimes, you despicable son of a bitch. We've had an agent on the inside for the past few months, gathering all of the evidence that we'll need in order to make sure all of you never see the light of day." Suddenly several more black-garbed Shinigami arrived on the scene, further shocking the young teenagers. "Take these scumbags into custody immediately. I wanted them processed and put behind bars yesterday," commanded the Shinigami with spiky black hair. "You bastards. You shit-eating, rat bastards. You won't get away with this. Screeched Kamada as he and his squad were dragged away. They always say that. Said the gray-haired Shinigami, acting as if he had seen such a situation plenty of times before. Well, people do stupid shit when they're desperate. He then took notice of the two teenagers who had witnessed the entire debacle and who had most likely been chased by Kamada and his thugs. I can't begin to apologize for what you've had to experience from that lot. Are the two of you okay? Do any of you know whatever he was about to say next died in his throat the moment he turned to face them, which gave Naruto the chance to finally get a proper look at one of their rescuers. The man with spiky black hair had an angular face with some subtle scarring on his right side and had charcoal black eyes. On the left side of his Shihakishima, right around where his left pectoral would be, was a strange emblem that Naruto had never seen before. It was white diamond-shaped patch, with the short ends being bordered with small black triangles. In its center was the kanji character for the number 2 and had a black basque flower underneath it. The entire patch had a dark orange border surrounding it. But what really stood out for Naruto was the man's shocked expression, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. What the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. The Shinigami exclaimed suddenly, shocking the youngsters out of their stupor. Immediately, Naruto began to have a severe case of deja vu, specifically when he was still alive and when he had first arrived in the Soul Society. Hey. You can't talk to him like that. Just who do you think you are? Exclaimed Ranjiku, immediately coming to his defense. Her hold on his hand tightened, as if she were expecting that their supposed savior would turn on them and they had to make a sudden escape. What? No. I mean you're not supposed to be here yet. You're supposed to still be alive. Countered the, pointing directly at the boy in question. What is he talking about? Pondered Naruto. I'm supposed to still be alive, what is he talking about? Was this guy watching over me when I was still a ninja? Whoa, now hold up for a second. What's gotten you so worked up, Uchiha? Interjected the second Shinigami, his attention drawn to the commotion. Like his cohort, he too had a white and black diamond patch on the left side of his Shihakishima, except he had the kanji character for the number 9, as well as a white poppy flower and a 10-colored border. Yet just one glance at the man's face was all it took to capture Naruto's attention. It was almost like looking in the mirror for the whiskered blonde. With the exception of the green-gray eyes, semi-blush cheeks, and the sandy ash-gray hair, the adult standing before him looked almost exactly like him. Hell, the man could possibly be a distant cousin, uncle, lost older brother, or maybe, just maybe, dad. The end. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.